let's switch back to Eclipse. So what I would like to do now, I'm going to leave this class to you, so there will be a syntax reference for you to about the for loop. So what I will do is I'm going to click on the gray calculator app 1A. I'm going to just copy that, okay, and I'm going to paste it. And then I'm just going to call that 1B. Okay, so now in 1B over here, I'm actually going to double click on this. And let me just close the for loop just for avoid confusion. Maximize it by double clicking. So now what I would like to do is I want to show you exactly how you can minimize or eliminate all the duplicates that we talk about using a for loop. Let me first of all give you some overview about how I'm going to proceed, so you wouldn't be so shocked. Okay, an idea would be, so this very first one about prompting the user for their name. So this is not really being duplicated. So this is not part of the loop. Okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do the loop after this. Okay, I'm gonna put a loop over here, and then so this will be the first part of the repetition. I'll start with that. So it's going to be this one here will be one part, right? You can think about this will be the first iteration. And this will be the second iteration. You can think about each iteration is going to do a similar action. There might be some minor discrepancy, some minor difference, but we can use the loop counter to control that difference, right? You can think about for the very first iteration, loop counter is going to be 1 over here. And for the second iteration, loop counter is going to be 2, and then 2, and then etc. We got 5 iterations in total to really read in the values from the user. And then we're also going to deal with the weighted sum over here. That's something we're going to see exactly. Okay, and then you can see this part over here. I can somehow integrate them into the body of the loop to say for the very first iteration, after I have read in the user's input for the marks. Let's say for marks number 1 and also weight number 1, I can print it out right away. Okay, I just want to give you some idea right now, so I'm going to do it right now. Okay. So what I will do is I'm simply just going to type a for loop over here. So now I can show you slightly different initialization. The loop counter is going to be initialized to be 1. So you can say for integer I is initialized to be 0. We can say as long as I is less than or equal to 5, which means as soon as the negation of that is going to be the case, meaning that not the case, I less than or equal to 5, which is equivalent to I strictly larger than 5, meaning that it's 6, right? As soon as the I's value incremented up to 6, we should stop, all right? Just to give you a little bit of rehearsal. And then I plus plus. Okay, so the value of I, actually should be 1. Sorry about that. That's what I meant to say. Starting to be 1, and then incremented by 1 every time. So 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, and as soon as it's incremented from 5 to 6, we're going to stop the iteration, right? So that's why you can see having this properly incremented, also having this properly initialized is so important. All right, before I write, let me just take copy this part over here just to get some idea, okay? Let me just copy that. All right, so this is what I meant to do. And now this part, the only part that's going to vary from iteration to iteration is about this part over here. So it could be 1, could be 2, all the way to 5, right? Assignment, so what I will do is I. Okay, so that's what I will do. So of your assignment, and then I over here. And then you may just want to, I think that's okay. Yeah, just assignment 1. All right, similarly, I'm also going to say assignment and then I over here. I can also be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then it's going to be over here, it's going to be out of a particular range. All right, and then I can tell you that the only difference I'm going to make over here, rather than declaring so many variables for the weights and so many variables for the marks, I'm going to show you exactly how to code, kind of type it out first, and then I'll explain that a little bit later. Okay, so now I just need one single variables. I can simply say weight. I can also say marks over here. That's all I need. All right, and then I want to say after this, after I've read in the weights and also the marks, I want to print this out as well to show the user what has been the breakdown, right? For every iteration, I can use it. You might be thinking that, should I use an array? I would say at this point, we don't really try to solve the problem using array. So that would be maybe the topic for maybe next week's tutorial. For this week, we don't use any array. Okay, I'll put it over here. Okay, and then it's going to be just marks and also the weights. And then for here, rather than simply just 1, it's going to be plus I. Okay. All right, just make sure I got a proper spacing over here. I just need one more space, right? I can only just give you a very quick overview later, but you should really try to compare the original version with lots of duplicates and also the new version with without any duplicate using a loop. All right, so the only issue left is about how we calculate this weighted sum. Okay, let me write out exactly it should be like, and then I'll explain that maybe a little bit later. Okay, all I need would be, let me just copy one of them. Okay, what I will do is I'm going to declare some variable outside the scope of the for loop, meaning that I can also use it outside the for loop over here. I can print it out at the end, right? That's pretty much like the scope rule that I spoke about. And then I'm going to initialize, cut this part over here. I'm going to use it. I can initialize the weighted sum to be 0.0. And then I'm going to accumulate it gradually, iteration by iteration. Every time, I'm just going to reassign weighted sum over here. And remember the augmented assignment over here. So we can say weighted sum is assigned to weighted sum plus, right? So I can also say plus equal, but if you like, I can simply just put this. That's also fine, right? Plus, so rather than marks number 1, should be just marks. And then the weights over here, like that. All right, so now you can pretty much see that, right? I declare a variable outside the scope of the for loop so that I can also refer to it over here. Sys out over here. Okay, and then let me see what I said. Okay, over here. You know what? Let me just copy that. I need that. So this will be weighted sum over here. And I believe I'm done, so everything else can be deleted. So this will be the solution using just a for loop. I really try to show you the ugly intermediate state to see how I go from the original version to this current version over here, right? Why don't we try very quickly? Let's now launch the Java application and then click on that. Enter my name, Jackie, and then what's the weight for your assignment 1? Let's say 20%. And then let's say I got 54. Do you see any problem already? Right? You can see it is good that for every iteration, we actually prompt the user for their weights and marks for the assignment 1 or assignment 2, etc. Right? That's exactly these two lines are doing. Okay, number 1, that's part of the body for the loop. We are printing these two always, right, for each iteration. However, if you go back to the console over here, after that, it tries to print out this breakdown for assignment 1 prematurely. What we wanted to do initially, if you go back to the previous version, we want to print out the breakdown at the end, not for every iteration, right? So there should be some change over here. All right, let's understand that. Currently, the version is not exactly working. We're still missing something. Any suggestion? You might be thinking, why don't we use an array to really store all the breakdown from each iteration, and then we got an array of element 5 elements in there. I would say that's okay if you know array already, but I don't assume that on your fellow students. So I would say even without an array, we can still solve it. Okay. So now the problem is we want to leave these two system and out the print line statement in the same. We don't want to move them. Okay, they should be here, right, to prompt the user for every iteration, for every assignments. But now for this part over here, we don't simply just want to print it prematurely. We want to somehow accumulate it into some string value and then print out the string value all the way to the end. Okay, that's what we want to do. So what I will do is I'm going to say string. It's going to be outside the scope for the loop, so I can use it later outside the loop. Let's say report is empty string over here, and then so this is the only line I want to replace over here, only this line. I can say result is assigned to result plus That's one way to do, but I'll show you the shorthand. You can also say plus equal. That's also going to work. And then I just want this part of the string as well. Just this one here. All right, that's it. And then, oh, actually I called it report, not result. Sorry about that. It should be report over here, right? Of course, you can write report equals report plus. That will also work, right? And then what we can do is we can simply say system.out print line over here, and then we can say report. So that'll be the breakdown. We want to print it at one go. All right, let's see. This should improve everything that we saw. Let's try again. Launch the application, and then Jackie, and then 20%, and then I can say I got 56. You can see now I didn't print out this part over here, the breakdown over here, line number 26 prematurely. It's simply stored into a string value silently. Okay, let's say 15%, and then I got maybe 67, and then maybe 10%, and then I got maybe 69, and also 20%, I got 89, and also let's say I really screwed up assignment 5. Let's say it's 10%, I got only 23, right? And then pretty good there. You can see what's the problem here. You can see somehow the string is really a breakdown. However, somehow I don't really have the new line in between, right? You can see that, right? So how can I add a new line? I should add a new line. So what I can do is, all I need to do is I just need to say plus maybe a new line over here to accumulate it, right? That's really important, okay? And then I'll let you try over here, but it's actually working. But why don't I try very quickly? Very quickly. Right, I just really try to show you mistake by mistake so that you can also improve gradually. Okay, 10, 90, 10, 89, 10, 78, and 10, 72, and also 10. And then finally, 99. So this is pretty good, I would say, right? So if you really want to improve it, let's try to make perfection. It seems like for the very last iteration, I really don't want to print out another new line, right? You can see it's like a conditional, right? I don't want to print out a new line. So why don't I try to show you something here? So inside the loop, you can also put some if statement. Okay, I can say this. I can say, I would say if the current assignment I is actually less than or equal to 4, right? In that case, I'm going to accumulate result further by the new line over here. That's what I can say. So I don't need it here. Meaning that if the current value of I is actually 5, if the current value for, again, I always forgot. It should be report, not result. Beg your pardon. So now I'm saying that if the current value for I is actually for assignment 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to print a new line at the end. I'm going to put a new line at the end of the string. Otherwise, if the current value is actually I, is actually 5, in that case, I wouldn't put a new line. All right. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Right? I really try to show you different bits for this logic here over here. Final time. Let's see if that will work. Jackie over here. 10%, 23, 10%, 33, 10%, just getting better each time. And then 10%, 53, and 10%, 63. All right. So this will be really the perfect output. You know, that's really identical to what we said, what we saw in the previous one. But you can see this is working now. But this is much simpler over here. By using a loop. There's no duplication of code compared with the previous one, right? I would say I'm gonna use my iPad to explain to you very quickly some important parts that you should really notice. Otherwise, you should really do the following exercise for yourself. You want to compare this version here with the previous version, which would be Great Calculator App 1A, to really see how we make the improvement from one to the other. All right, so let me now switch to iPad about this example over here. So that's exactly the code we have developed. Eventually, I'm going to let you do the contrast line by line with the previous version with lots of duplicates. But let me just point out to you the important how you understand this program here. There are quite many things that's really worth mentioning here. First of all, you can see over here, I'm going to tell you where the loop is. So this is the loop. this part here. So this is the for loop that we have written over here, and anything outside is going to be outside the scope of the for loop, right? You can see the blue one is the scope for the loop. Okay, let's now just talk about inside the loop, and then we'll talk about outside the loop. Let's now start with the loop counter. You can see integer I is simply initialized to be 1, and then it's going to be as long as I is less than or equal to 5, we're going to keep executing the body of the loop. What's the body of the loop? It's really important. Let me do that. Whatever that's within the opening and closing curly brackets will be the body of the loop. So now let me just box it as well. Okay, it's really important for you to also realize that as well, right? So the pink part is really the body of the loop. Okay, so the pink one over here is really the body of the loop. The body of the loop, or body implementation of the loop. All right. Excuse me. And then you can see the initial value for I is simply just equal to 1. So that means you can think about I over here, and also the I over here. So these guys are really going to make a difference, right, for each iteration. For example, you're going to say assignment 1, assignment 2, assignment 3, etc. So I's value will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's how we actually somehow try to minimize to eliminate all the duplicates compared with the previous version, right? I'll let you follow that, right? So it's really important to see that. And then you want to see the following, okay? So let's now see a little bit about the compound statement over here. You can see this guy here. You can see the if statement over here. So this is also part of the body of the loop, right? For sure, it's inside. You can simply use the value of I. So I would say in principle, inside the loop, your best friend will be the value for the loop counter I. So the value of I, the loop counter, really tells you where you are in the iteration. So now we are saying that as long as the I's value is actually less than or equal to 4, so that means these four assignment 1, 2, 3, 4 should be the one that you should really put a new line at the end, right? So that's just one example of using conditional inside the loop. Of course, this is only an if statement, the simplest one you can write without the else part. You can definitely try. For other application, you may just want to say if, and then else, and etc. Okay. Okay, so now I want to say one more thing over here. Okay, I think within the loop I'm okay. Now let me talk about outside the loop, which is equally important. Let's see what happened over here. You can see we actually declare outside outside the blue box, outside the scope of the for loop, we actually got weighted sum over here. We also got string report. So now you want to think about what's really the scope for these two variables. So the scope precisely would be over here. Basically, after their declaration, and then for the rest of the main method, it will be the scope for these two variables, right? So the orange one, you can see the orange scope really contains the blue scope, right? The orange one over here really contains the blue scope over here. So that's my point. So that means you can definitely use the weighted sum and also report inside this particular loop, right? That's very important to see. And then let me just annotate it together for you. So this will be the scope of both variable weighted sum and also report. Weighted sum and also report. And as you can see, the way we do it is by accumulating the value for weighted sum. You can see we give some initial value, default value 0.0, and also empty string over here. And then inside the loop, for every iteration, we simply try to use the plus equal to accumulate its value. And also use the equal, you can also use plus equal, it's the same meaning, right? The weighted sum is really equal to its current value plus the value over here, right? You can refer to your lecture materials about more detailed tracing for other example, but for the tutorial purpose, that's all I need to say. All right, I think that's about of understanding loop. And finally, you can see outside the scope of the blue box, I can also refer to the report. I can also refer to the weighted sum, simply because you can see these two usages are still within the scope of this orange box over here, right? So think about the scope like a boxing, the area that you can use a particular variable that's declared, right? As soon as I declare, for example, this variable over here, I would know that the rest of this particular method will be the scope. On the other hand, if I declare the loop variable here, which is local to the for loop, its scope would just be the rest of the for loop over here, which is much smaller, right, compared with the main method. All right, so that's about the points I'd like to mention to you. And again, it will be really up to you to really compare very carefully about how we move from the original version to this version over here by removing duplicates. So that will really give you a valuable lesson about how you may write loops. Before I move on to showing you while loop, which is another flavor of writing loops, expressively speaking, they are the same. However, I just want to show you like an intermediate step to really move to the while loop by giving to you another variance for the for loop. Let's see how we can do it. Let me switch to Eclipse over here. Okay, so let's now double click on the tab. So we go back to our package explorer. What I want to do is right click on 1B. So that's a for loop version. Copy, and then we're simply going to paste it. So that would be just make it 1C. Okay. First of all, go back to 1B over here. Okay, I want to just make a note over here. So here, the scope of loop counter I is within the for loop. It's a very important comment over here. Okay, and also another point is I++ is executed at the end of each iteration. I would say this part might be whenever you're trying to trace your code for the for loop, this might be the part you just forget to actually execute it at the end of the iteration. You can refer to my earlier tracing to just confirm. All right, so that's about 1B. I just need to copy these two lines for now. Okay, I'm now going to give you another flavor of for loop, which looks very similar to the while loop, which will just make it like a choice for you. So let me just say that up front. For while loop and for loop, you cannot say which one is actually better, right? They can just be converted to each other. It's just like in some certain scenario, it might be easier to use the syntax for for loop to write it. In some cases, it might be easier to use a while loop to syntax to write it, right? Just that. But expressively speaking, in terms of their expressive power, they are equivalents. Okay. All right. So now let me simply go back to 1C over here, the one we just created. Let me close 1B. Okay. And then let me just go around here. Okay, if you can hit a new line over here, let me paste the two comments I just copied, right? So now I'm going to just tell you that I'm going to somehow make a variance over here so that the scope of the loop counter I, rather than within the for loop, is going to be within the method, the containing method. In this case, it will be the main method. But if you try to write your for loop inside the utility method, which I will show you later, in that case, that will be within the utility method. All right. So now, how do I do the variant? Very simple. Okay. As I said before, you can optionally actually move the declaration part for the loop counter outside the loop. In this case, you may actually refer to I value maybe outside the for loop, for example, over here. You may do that, right? That's something I already explained. Okay. But notice that if you move out this part over here, you should still keep the semicolon here. If you get rid of it, you're going to get syntax error, right? You can see the red underline over there, right? Make sure you always got two semicolon, exactly two semicolon for the for loop, okay? And then let me do one more thing. Remember I said before, I++ should be executed at the end of each iteration, right? So now it would be equivalent if I simply do this, cut it, and then I will simply put at the end of the iteration over here. So this means this will give you some flexibility. When this part over here, you can see after the second semicolon is actually empty. So that means there is no update to the loop counter, but you must have it. Otherwise, your loop wouldn't terminate. In that case, I simply choose to put I++ at the end. So some people might prefer this style over here that will remind you whenever you trace your code for debugging purpose, you always put I++ at the end. I personally like this actually, okay? So now, if you simply try to look at this part over here for the for loop, we simply don't have the part that's to the left of the first semicolon. We also don't have anything to the right after the second semicolon, right? So now this will really give you something very similar to a while loop, which I'm going to talk about later, okay, very soon. All right, so that will be the second variant over here. So let me emphasize this. This variant here is not too bad. You simply just put the loop counter outside the scope for the for loop, and also you try to make it explicit about when you want to put I++, right? That's simply at the end. Later on, maybe for some whatever reason, if that's appropriate for your application, you might choose to do I++ maybe earlier in the body of the code, but in the loop. But for now, I just put it at the end, just as standard. All right. Right, you can also test again about this version over here. It works, okay? And then now let me just move on to while loop.